What if Disney wrote its own fan fiction? I think it would look a little something like this. Salutations! My name is Becca and this is Words and Other Malarkey. Welcome to Lessons from My Bookshelf, where I go through all the books in my home library and talk about the writing lessons and whether or not they're actually good. Today's book is The Kingdom Keepers by Ridley Pearson, and this one, so thus far, I think we're on book number 4 now. My reviews have been very positive and nostalgic because they were all old favorites and they were just full of praise. I really didn't have a bad thing to say about any of the previous 3. Not so with The Kingdom Keepers, and you know how much everybody loves negative reviews, or at least critical reviews and rants. So this one may get a little bit ranty. And don't think that I'm gonna hate on this book. No offense to Mr. Pearson, no offense to those who like The Kingdom Keepers. I remember I read this probably around 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, and I remember liking it. Now the only reason I own it was because I had this Barnes & Noble gift card, and I was just browsing the juvenile fiction section, and I came across this one. I was like, oh, I know this one, and open it up and come to find that it's freaking autographed, and it was on clearance. I don't understand why, if it was a mistake. I mean, unless this is not Ridley Pearson's signature, which I've never tried to verify, but I don't see why it wouldn't be. Maybe obviously he visited Barnes & Noble one time, but maybe he randomly signed one and put it back on the shelf, which is pretty cool. So thank you, Mr. Pearson, for leaving that for a little wide-eyed reader like me to find. So I've owned it for a long time, but I don't think I've ever actually read it since I bought it. And it has been a good 10 years. So it was fun to revisit this. I remembered some things, but the details, especially towards the end, were kind of blurry. So it was kind of rediscovering the story. So this was published in 2005, and this was following the success of Peter and the Starcatchers, which was written by Ridley Pearson and Dave Barry, which I actually read in junior high school. I've actually read more than one book by this author, even though he was a co-writer. And Peter and the Starcatchers is an origin story for Peter Pan. It's not Disney canon. It's not even original Peter Pan book canon. It's just a reimagining of the origin story, and from what I remember, it was really good. And it's Disney Press. This is Disney Editions, and I know that probably doesn't seem very shocking now, especially because 15 years later Disney owns so much, but it was kind of a shock back then to see, oh my god, Disney has its own printing press. What's that like? What's it like writing for Disney? I think I have an idea. Kingdom Keepers is actually a series. There's 7 books in the series, and okay, so this is the first edition, right? Look how cool the cover art is. I might zoom in on this because it's really neat. There's kind of a silhouette. You got the Cinderella castle in the background, and the kids being chased by pirates, which is a thing. It's a thing that happens. But when they turned it into a series, I don't think it was supposed to be a series, but I think this one did surprisingly well. So they republished it with new cover art and with basically a new title. If you see The Kingdom Keepers: Disney After Dark, that's the same as this book. It just got renamed because they turned it into a series, and they already say 7 of them. 7 of them. And the covers kind of look like Goosebumps. No offense to the cover artist in that case, but this is a lot cooler than the Goosebumps covers. So The Kingdom Keepers takes place at Disney World in Orlando, and it's about these 5 teens who were hired to become DHIs, which stands for both Disney Host Interactive and Daylight Hologram Imaging. So they're basically holographic tour guides, and it's kind of a new experimental technology. Nowadays it seems like something that's really pretty realistic, but I don't know if Disney World actually does it. For the purpose of the book, it's supposed to be kind of a sci-fi sort of thing. So the kids start waking up at the park at night, and they think at first that it's just like really vivid dreams, but what they end up discovering is that they're actually waking up as their holographic selves, and it's called crossing over. So they wake up at the park at night, and they can like see characters kind of moving around the park, and they learn that so kind of a la, I don't know, Rise of the Guardians maybe? There were so many things that I kind of compared this book to, and nothing was like quite the same as the concept, but it reminded me of so many other things. But a la Rise of the Guardians, the belief in the characters of Disney has brought them to life, which includes the villains. So the villains, which are called the Overtakers, are threatening to, as you may have guessed, overtake the park and possibly the world. Like, it's never really made clear, but it's kind of like, if they take over the park, who knows what else they would do. They won't stop at the park. So that's it. The characters have come to life, and the reason that these 5 kids have been turned into holograms is because they have to be like half fake in order to see and to fight these brought to life characters. Like, regular people can't see them, but then they kind of can see them. I'll get into this later, but I just want to say some of the magic system, most of the magic system, doesn't really make much sense at all. And the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. But basically, the Imagineers thought up this scheme, and the DHIs as like tour guides are just kind of like a front to like turn these kids into hologram people so they can fight these characters that have come to life. And Walt Disney, the Walt Disney, who gets referenced in this a lot, has left a riddle for them to solve, to find a MacGuffin so that can somehow defeat the Overtakers. Yeah, that's the plot of the Kingdom Keepers. And listen, I don't want to knock it too much, and I know that because I've started at the beginning of my library building, like so far these have been middle grade fiction because I was in middle school or thereabouts when I started like collecting books. And so this is once again like middle grade fiction. And so I don't want to impose like my weird, you know, literary education on it too much, or even like my experience reading YA, because there is plenty of shitty YA, and there's plenty of good YA. There's plenty of good middle grade fiction. This falls like, I'm just trying to evaluate this as a piece of writing. Like, as a 12, 13-year-old, like, you're gonna be entertained by this. I was, and even as like an upper teen or young adult, there's still a lot of entertainment to be gained from reading this. I'm just trying to like evaluate it on its own merits. I know it's hard to do, but I know that this, like, the intended audience is not like literary scholars or even like bibliophiles. So just bear with me here. I'm going to try to be fair to this book and not bash middle grade fiction too much. I'm really sorry. I was once a middle schooler. It's an awkward time. You need to read books. Good books, bad books, all sorts of books. First, let me just tell you all the things that I compared this to throughout my time reading it. Toy Story, Elf, Rise of the Guardians, The Banana Splits. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Ready Player One, National Treasure, Night at the Museum too. National Treasure maybe not so much. I think I was trying to think of Night at the Museum. I don't know why, like, those two get mixed up in my head. They're totally different movies. Anyway, so, okay, let's start with what I didn't like about rereading this, and then I'll end on a positive note. How's that sound? Okay, good. So, I think I mentioned just previously that the magic system really doesn't make any sense. like, I get the idea of the characters in the park coming to life, and the half hologram thing kind of makes sense too. Like, the rationale is that, like, they have to be half from this world and half from, like, the character world in order to see them and fight them. So by turning them into holograms, they've turned them into characters, essentially. So that part mostly makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that, like, they're supposedly the only ones that are supposed to see the overtakers, and by the end, like, so the main villain in this, and actually another criticism, I'll get to it in a second, the only character you actually interact with is Maleficent, who is like an awesome classic Disney villain, right? But like, by the end, people can see her. Like, she's like going around the park like as herself, but people just think she's like a costumed actress, you know, or whatever. And like, people can see her just fine. So that didn't make sense. Like, why? And she can affect them like in their human states, you know? Like, it's not just like, oh, they can only, you can only touch them if you're half hologram. It's like the line gets really blurred, and by the end, like, they aren't even in their holographic states. Like, the final climactic battle, not to spoil anything, happens when they're just people. They're like on a regular day in the park. So it like kind of contradicted itself at a lot of points, and it also wasn't really clear like why, and not that it really had to be explained, because I can kind of ride with the idea that belief has brought the characters to life, but like, it gets explained in like 10 different ways. Like, it might be some kind of metaphysical force, or it might just be some kind of magic within the park itself, or it might be Walt Disney, or it might be the Imagineers, or a combination of all of them. And it was just kind of really rough. And so the narrative is also pretty choppy, and I get that like it's kind of a snappy you know, action adventure sort of tone and pacing, but like, some of the dialogue between the characters is like so awkward, the way they interject each other. I don't even know how to give an example. It just is what it is, and it kind of beats around the bush with the exposition. And so like, the person that like kind of introduces them into their role as like half holograms, like tells them what's going on here, is this old guy named Wayne, and he's like an OG Imagineer, like he knew Walt Disney kind of thing. And he only speaks in platitudes, which is so irritating. Like, every time they ask him a question, he just responds with like another question, or with some like old proverb sort of thing. Like, just like, give me a second and I'll give you an example, and I promise you it's just, because as I was like tabbing this book, as you can see, I made notes. Like, I wrote some pretty interesting comments. A lot of like, are you effing kidding me moments, which is just never a good thing to have to write in a book. But so when they figure out that Maleficent is like behind all the shenanigans, it's like, was it Maleficent? Philby asked. Wayne's eyebrows arched. He did not answer Philby directly. Like, they even say in the speaker tag, he did not answer Philby directly. What do you know about her? And then, amazing things happen when we put our minds to it. There is a saying that seeing is believing, but believing is seeing as well, and touching, and hearing, connecting. And then, the witch Maleficent has something to do with this, Finn said, one of the characters. He told Wayne everything that had happened recently. Apparently, she has everything to do with this, Wayne agreed. The Overtakers, Finn tested. There are other Overtakers besides Maleficent. Too many to count, like the pirates. Worker bees is all. The pirates don't matter much, but you must underestimate nothing, no one. Conviction is the better part of intent. Few battles are won by strength alone. Cunning and knowing your resources can help you overpower the most powerful. He sounds like a fortune cookie. I'm sorry. He sounds like a fortune cookie. Oh my god. Like, and even the characters are irritated at him. They're just like, just answer the question, old man, because it's obvious that he knows everything. And maybe he's trying to do like the wise old mentor thing, like trying to get them to figure it out themselves. But by the end, he's like instrumental in helping them succeed. Again, no spoilers, but it's like throughout the book, he's just like kind of like takes like a backseat, is like, you guys got to handle this. I'm just gonna like be here giving you platitudes as answers and hoping you figure it out. But by the end, he is like part of the action, and it's weird, like, and it's annoying, and I feel bad for these characters who are not the most fleshed out of human beings anyway, but like they're just trying to get some answers, and this guy just like won't help them. And this isn't like light stuff, it's like characters threatening to take over the world. Oh my god. So there's that, and then there's like some just cringy moments, just some weird pacing throughout. And like, for example, there's the main character Finn. He's rounding up the other DHIs, but in the process he makes friends with a girl who's not a DHI, but her parents work at the park. But like the way that she gets introduced actually is like in like chapter 2 or whatever. It's like, oh, have you seen that new girl? She's really cute. And then like the next chapter, they're like in a bus together and she's helping him. Like he never like went and talked to her. There was no introduction. There was no getting to know each other. It was like they totally skipped her getting introduced to the story, aside from just noticing her. And the same happens with like this other girl who's kind of like an antagonist. She just kind of gets like noticed by the main character, and then she just ends up involved. Like there's no development of her character. She's just there. So again, it was just like really jarring to read. It like pulled you out of the story when it was like, what the heck? Where'd she come from? What is she doing? And then like the way that things come together in the end is just like so odd. Again, I don't want to give the ending away, but the ending is so weird. So there's like a lot of coincidences in this book. Like a lot of when they like are solving the riddle, a lot of the things that lead them to solve it is that one of the characters just happens to have a piece of information, you know, that like would be impossible for them to have otherwise. It's just like, oh, I happen to have seen this, and this is integral to the solving of this part of the puzzle. And it's just like, and then at one point, like they're trying to solve a part of it, and it involves like, again, no spoilers, arranging letters, and they can't figure it out, and then the wind blows, and it blows them into the right order. And I'm just like, was it magic? Was that Walt Disney? Like, here's the answer. And if so, like, why is the wind giving them answers and not the guy who's actually supposed to be like their mentor? Okay. The other thing that was really aggravating about reading this was stop it, go away. There's a puppy involved now. Stop it! You want to be in the video? Oh my goodness. Say hi. This is Keone. She's a little attention hog. She was sleeping before, and now she's not. So, you know. Cuteness factor. So the other really irritating thing about reading this was that, so first of all, Maleficent is the only character you interact with, even though it's established in the first chapter that other characters have come to life. Like he sees like Winnie the Pooh, like he doesn't talk to them, they don't have any lines of dialogue, nothing happens, he just sees them walking around the park. Maybe it was a copyright thing, you know, and I know this is Disney Press, but like maybe there was only so much that Pearson could do feasibly. I don't know. And I don't know if the other books, like I know the other books explore other Disney villains, but I don't know if they explore if other characters that have come to life become important to the plot. And I think that would have been really interesting. I mean, even if it was one, like if you just had like, we'll use Peter Pan as an example since he's fresh on the brain. What if Peter Pan like was helping him out, or like they just like had conversations, or their like whole like MacGuffin search involved finding specific characters. Anyways, I just feel like It would have been cooler that way, but I understand if like it just wasn't an option. So the only character that you get to know that actually talks and that interacts with the other characters is Maleficent, who's the villain. But, and I get that this is like, you know, this isn't, I get that this is kind of a fantasy what if, right? But Maleficent is so out of character. And if you've, and I don't mean Maleficent, and this is way before Angelina Jolie's Maleficent, okay? And I haven't seen those movies yet, so I'm sure I've heard she plays a great Maleficent, but I'm talking about the Sleeping Beauty original Maleficent. Like, just comparing like what I remember from how she's portrayed in that movie versus this book, there's a lot of like dissonance between her characterization. Like her skin is described as green, and I know that like, you know, the coloring wasn't great way back when in like Sleeping Beauty, so I know her skin's like really, I think, supposed to be green, but it also looks kind of grayish too. I feel like just after like years of enhancing the movie, like it might have become greener, but they describe it as like Elphaba green. Like honestly, Maleficent to me sounded more like the Wicked Witch of the West than Maleficent, and that bothered me. Like the things that she does, the things that she says, I mean, she's not like, she doesn't act like regal and dignified, which is like what her character is in the movie. She just like acts kind of like a scheming witch, you know? And I know that she is a witch, but her title in the movie is Mistress of All Evil, right? Like she like thinks of herself like a queen. She doesn't think of herself like as a witch per se, even though she does really dark magic. And also like her main power in this is to make things cold. And this, again, this is way before Frozen. Like where in Sleeping Beauty did she ever freeze anything? Like all she did, you know, she had like, she transformed a lot of things, and she does that a couple times in the book, but she never turns into a dragon, which I think would be pretty sick. What else does she do? She mostly transforms things into other things, or curses people, I guess. So like it just felt really odd, and I get that this is like a reimagining, you know, but like if you're gonna bring a character to life and it's the belief in the character that made the character alive, then like wouldn't it act like the character that the people believe in? I don't know. Anyways, so I don't mean to be rude, but go away. So let me just talk about some of the things that I like, because I think we should end on a positive note. And okay, so the concept is pretty cool. I always liked the concept, and it's interesting, and I know I called it Disney fan fiction, and like maybe in a sense it kind of is, because it's Disney press and it's about Disney World. So, and it's really like pretty positive about itself. Like, you know, I mean, like, what are they gonna do? Make Walt Disney the villain? Ooh, that would be sick. Ooh, but like, it's kind of like Ready Player One. Like, it's really like, it's really reverent of its pop culture. So it's reverent of its pop culture, and the creator, in this case Walt Disney, but like Ready Player One, it was whoever made the game, you know, is like basically a god. I don't know how the other books handle like the whole Walt Disney and Imagineers thing, but I imagine that it just becomes more and more they have, hey, stop it, more and more that they have kind of set these things in motion. Like, also, how did Walt Disney know that his characters would come to life? Because he like put up this like this riddle just in case, like in case of emergency, please find this MacGuffin. And then like the Imagineers, like how did they know that the riddle was for, like, could only be solved by holographic people? Okay, anyway. Okay, so back to the concept is pretty cool. I like that it's set at Disney World. I like that it's answering the question what happens after dark. That's kind of like a Night at the Museum thing, like what happens when after the park closes, after the museum closes. So that's cool. I love the idea of villains like coming to life and being like, wait a second, we got the short end of the stick. You know, let's flip the script. I feel like that's also a movie somewhere, but if I think of it later, I'll put it in somewhere. But that felt like really House of Villains-esque, you know? Oh, House of Mouse was so fun. I loved House of Mouse. But like we're taking over, like we're in charge here. So that seemed pretty cool. It also has some really clever moments. Like I said that the writing was like, it's kind of choppy at points and the pacing's kind of weird, but like there are some really clever moments. There's some really interesting story beats. I love any time that they're like looking for a clue at the park and the animatronics come to life and attack them. There's like the really like the scene that you would find in like a movie trailer, let's say, is them going through the It's a Small World ride and the little dolls come to life and attack them. It's so creepy. It's almost like horror-esque, which is maybe why they decided to go with like a Goosebumps vibe for like the second edition covers. I don't know, maybe. But I really liked that. That was really fun. Pirates of the Caribbean is like some of the main like henchmen, and that's really cool too. Like just all the villain stuff, like, hey, stop it! All the villain stuff, aside from Maleficent being out of character, like, really worked for me. Let's see, what else? It's a page turner. It actually does, like, move pretty fast, and you do want to know what happens next. And it also has pages that you can turn, and that makes it a book. And it also has a jacket and a spine and a title that got changed in the new edition, I suppose, because they figure they could turn it into a series and make it go on and on and on. So that is The Kingdom Keepers, and it will be staying on my shelves, maybe only because it's signed by Ridley Pearson, but also because I have fond memories of reading it, and for all its flaws, it's a pretty fun book. So that's that. Next time, I'm approaching my first collection, which is the Sherlock Holmes collection. And I said in my intro video that I wasn't sure how I was going to split it up. So what I've decided to do, I've actually read it's 4 full-length novels and like a ton of short stories. So and I know I've read 2 out of the 4 novels, and they're pretty short. They're like novellas, really. So what I'm going to do for next time is read the 2 novels that I haven't read, which I believe is The Sign of the Four and The Valley of Fear. And those are going to be next time. And then I think I will do either a bonus video or just another video at some point in the future, not directly following this next one, where I go through like as many of the short stories as possible. So that's how I've decided to do it for this one, because this is a big, thick boy. Dummy thick. So that's what we're doing next time. So until then, keep it weird and go to Disney World and tell me if you see any characters come to life. And stop it! No! No! Gosh dang it! Freaking don't get a dog. I mean, dogs are great, but
Kiki. Hey.
Can't even finish.
Reacting to you.
Okay. Okay.